Did you know that tech has higher levels of pay discrimination than other professions? Well, if you just attended my keynote, you know that in a tech role, 63% of women, when starting a new tech job, say they want equal pay and benefits. So this talk is a continuation of my keynote that includes a technical deep dive on the architecture of my new app, Salary Overflow. Welcome to Connect Reimagine. I'm Kesha Williams, and we'll be talking about furthering equality in tech through salary transparency. So what's on the agenda today? I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'll talk to you about my new app, Salary Overflow, and how it helps to bring transparency to tech salaries. I'll show you a quick demo. We'll talk through the architecture and how I built Salary Overflow using AWS Amplify in just a few weeks. We'll review my lessons learned, and then we'll talk about next steps for the app and next steps for you. So now let's talk about me. I've been in IT for 26 years. I can't believe it's been that long. I built the bulk of my career in the Java software engineering space. And I'm a person that believes in continuous improvement, always learning new things. So about 7 years ago, I stepped into the cloud and learned Amazon Web Services. And then about 3 years ago, I learned about machine learning. And through that work, I'm recognized as an AWS machine learning hero. That just means I'm recognized as an industry expert, as I'm always out there sharing knowledge and lessons learned. I'm also recognized as an Alexa champion. I currently serve as a principal training architect with a company called A Cloud Guru. Now let's talk about my new app, Salary Overflow. I created Salary Overflow to bring transparency to tech salaries. Now, when you hear the term Salary Overflow, think Stack Overflow, but for salaries, because it's a place where you can go and get help with your salary. Like I said, the overall goal is to close the gender pay gap and provide transparency into tech salaries. The initial release, or the MVP, just to prove out the idea, was released back in October. And it's actually done better than I expected, so I'm currently working on the next release. The current release allows you to enter your salary information, view existing salaries, and you're able to filter by gender, title, location, currency, salary, and years of experience. So let's see Salary Overflow in action. Here we have the landing page for Salary Overflow. When you join the very first time, you simply click Join Now and create an account. Here, if you already have a username and password, simply enter it and click Login. You'll be brought to a screen like this, the salary information screen. And look, over 2,000 of you have already gone in and entered your salary information. Thank you so much. So here you see the very first screen. You're able to navigate through the records using the next page arrow. You can always go to the last page, and you can go back to the first page. So let's say you live in Atlanta and you're curious about what pay looks like in Atlanta. Up here in the upper right in the search bar, type Atlanta, and you see it filters the records down. There are a total of 44 records in Atlanta. So I definitely need more people from Atlanta to go in and enter their salaries. And here is the first page. So for example, a project manager with 5 years of experience, a female, makes $57,000 a year. Down here, we have a junior UX designer, $70,000 a year, a female, 1 year experience. Let's see, we have a software engineer, $95,000, 6 years of experience. Let's go to the last page. Okay, look here. We have a Tier 2 technical support specialist, $60,000, 5 years of experience. And look here, a senior manager, penetration testing, $175,000, 10 years experience, and male. So what I've noticed, there have been a lot of women to go in and enter their salary information. Thank you for that. I definitely would like to see more men because it really gives us the full picture around salaries. All right, let's go back to the first page and clear out the filter. And let's say you want to filter by currency. So let's enter euros. So we actually have 73 records. On this first page, we see a full stack web developer, female, 1 year experience in the Netherlands, making 34,600 euros. Here at the bottom, we see a senior product designer, 70,000 euros, female in Germany. Let's scroll to the last page. Here we have a senior Java developer, 55,000 euros, male, 7 years experience in Paris. Now let's say you want to see a developer. So we actually have 119 records, and let's see. Front-end web developer, $85,000, female, 6 years, Atlanta. Let's scroll to the next page. Let's see a web application developer, $80,000, 3 years, Charlotte, North Carolina. And what if you're curious about the junior level? So let's just search on the word junior. Let's see, a junior engineer, 45,000 pounds, 1 year experience, female in London. Junior data scientist, $75,000, female, 0 years of experience, Massachusetts. Scroll to the end. Let's say junior full stack developer, 16,000 euros, male, 3 years experience in Spain. That's a quick look at Salary Overflow. I'm sure after seeing Salary Overflow, you can think up a lot of ways to use the app. One, if you have a job offer in hand, negotiate that offer using data from Salary Overflow. It really gives women the power to better negotiate their salaries. What if you want to make a career change and you want to know what tech job pays the most? Well, Salary Overflow can help you with that. What if you want to relocate in order to further your career? Well, Salary Overflow can help you with that as well. Future releases, I will incorporate machine learning to predict demand for a certain role in a given area and also to make salary predictions so you'll know what you can expect to be paid in a certain role or a certain area. Now let's talk about the architecture. Well, first of all, Salary Overflow runs on Amazon Web Services, AWS. The front end is built using React. And I'll give you a little secret. I also use this app as a way to learn new things. This was my first time using React. I'm typically an Angular person. Now, the app is hosted and globally distributed using Amazon S3 and Amazon CloudFront. So S3 is a way to host static websites, and CloudFront is a way to deliver your website globally. Authentication and authorization, I used Amazon Cognito user pools. Now let's talk about the back end. On the back end, there is a Lambda function. Now Lambda, think of it like a chunk of code that runs in the cloud, and it's meant to do one specific purpose. And I actually authored this Lambda in Python. And this Lambda is the new user sign up Lambda. So whenever a user creates a new profile, Lambda enters that profile In the database, speaking of a database, I used Amazon Aurora MySQL. Now, Aurora is essentially a database management system that sits on top of the MySQL database, and it just helps me with backup and replication and all of that fun stuff. Now, how do the back end and the front end communicate? Through GraphQL APIs, and I used AppSync in order to do that. And for website analytics, I use Amazon Pinpoint. In the past, I'd used Google Analytics, so this was my exploration into something new. And there's also a continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline that gets my code to production using a feature branching strategy. Tools used. I used AWS Amplify. That was my tool of choice. AWS Amplify is really cool because it helps you quickly build full stack web applications on AWS. It helped me set up the baseline for user authentication. It generated my GraphQL APIs based on a schema I provided. It helped me to set up Cognito user pools to help me secure my app and my GraphQL APIs, and the database. Now, out of the box, Amplify integrates with DynamoDB. But for me, I wanted to use a relational database because DynamoDB is a NoSQL database. And because my app, the data in my app has relationships where you have to join multiple tables in order to see the full picture, I decided to go with a relational database. And so I used Amazon Aurora MySQL. Now, I did have to go through a few extra steps to get Amplify to recognize Aurora, but it wasn't too bad. Now I'm going to walk you through the Salary Overflow app in the AWS Management Console. So I've logged into AWS and I've navigated to AWS Amplify. When you come to the screen, you notice that it's broken out by the backend environments and the front-end environments. Let's talk about the backend environments first. Let's scroll down. If you notice, I have 3 backend environments: dev, prod, and test. That's typical in any application. Notice for the development environment, and it flows over to the prod and test environments, I've added 3 categories: authentication, API, and analytics. Let's take a look at authentication. For authentication, I told you that I used Amazon Cognito. From the AWS Amplify console, I can jump right into the Cognito user pool used by my application. And the user pool is Salary Overflow. And here I'm able to see high-level information about all of the users in the system. For example, over here, if I click on Users and Groups, it shows me all of the users, whether or not they've enabled their account, whether or not they've verified their email and their phone number, any updates they've made, and when it was initially created. I'm able to scroll through this list and see all of the users. I'm also able to create users or import users. Now let's close this. And we looked at authentication. Remember, there was also the API category. Let's click on API. And I mentioned to you that I used GraphQL APIs, and AppSync helped me create that. So from AWS Amplify, I can go into AppSync to view my APIs. The first thing I told you, remember I said that I created a schema, and AWS Amplify used that schema to generate my APIs in AppSync. So let's take a look at the schema. We can click on Edit Schema, and over here on the left, it shows me the schema. There's this Create User Input that actually creates a user profile. You'll see the user ID is required, the username is required, everything else is optional. So I'll just scroll through. It has the mutators, it has the queries, etc. Now over here on the left-hand side, there's data sources. So for the API, there's one data source, It is the relational database. Remember, I told you I used Amazon Aurora on top of MySQL. So in order to get to that data source, you can click it here, and it brings up the Amazon Aurora MySQL dashboard. And remember, Aurora is just a database management system that sits on top of MySQL. Here it's Aurora MySQL 5.6, and it is serverless. Down here, it just shows you high-level information about capacity, CPU utilization, and database connections. Let's scroll down. Here it shows automated backups. So Aurora will help handle administration of the database for me so I can focus on building my app. So there's automated backups. Over here on the left-hand side, there's a query editor. You'll have to select the instance and enter your username and password in order to connect to the database. But there's a window where you can enter queries to see what's in your database. Let's close this. And I'm now back at the AppSync console. Notice here on the left-hand side, there are queries. Now this allows you to run a GraphQL query. The other query window we saw when we were looking at the database management piece of it, that was a SQL query. Now in this case, this is a GraphQL query. So here you're able to see all of the queries, and you simply just have to click on it to have it populate here. And here I'm querying for the dev test user. If I click run, it brings back information. Notice these are the fields that I'm not requiring at this point. Whenever you enter salary information, it is anonymous. You do not have to enter your name or your phone or your email. And with GraphQL, remember I was telling you about the flexibility. So now this time, let's say I only want to return the first name in this query. So I just remove it from the query and click run again. And this time only the first name returns. So that is the flexibility of GraphQL. Let's click on caching over here. Right now, I don't have caching for the API set up, but that is a feature of AppSync. It will allow you to cache your data to improve the performance of GraphQL queries. Now let's close the AppSync console. And I'm back to the dev backend screen. So we looked at authentication, we looked at the API. Now let's look at analytics. Remember I told you I used Pinpoint instead of Google Analytics to understand the website analytics. So from AWS Amplify, in order to open the analytics, click on View in Pinpoint, and it brings up the Pinpoint console. And right now, I don't have a lot of features enabled, just the default. So it shows me the daily active users. So it looks like there was a spike on May 14th, and then it kind of dropped off. And then there was a spike on June 4th. But it shows all of the new users and the 7-day retention rate out of the box. All right, let's close Pinpoint. Let's go back to Salary Overflow, and now let's look at the front-end environments. Now this shows all of my connected code branches. So I have a dev branch, a master branch, which is prod, and then a test branch. Notice here I'm using GitLab instead of GitHub for version control. Amplify has an integration with GitHub, but it also has a nice CI/CD integration with GitLab. So notice here it says continuous deploys set up with the dev backend. And notice here there's one preview. This is essentially a pull request called a merge request in GitLab. And this allows me to merge in changes from this feature branch. And I can actually preview it if I click on this, one open, and then click on preview URL. This will actually show me, once I log in, a version of the app with the requested changes integrated. And then once I review it and approve it, it will officially be deployed to dev. Let me close this and go back to the preview. And let's go back to the main page. Okay. And it's very easy to connect a code branch to one of your environments using this connect branch button. So I have the dev branch connected to the dev backend. I have the master branch connected to the prod backend. I have the test branch set up with the test backend. There's one last thing that I want to show you, and that's over here under domain management. This screen allows me to connect my domain name, www.salaryoverflow.com, to production or my master branch of code. And you see that here. It's really simple to set it up. We have this URL and this URL. They both point to the master branch of my code. As you can see, Amplify really helps you configure, manage, and monitor all of the moving parts of a full stack web application running on AWS. Now let's talk about my lessons learned. I learned a lot of lessons during the development of Salary Overflow. The first is that AWS Amplify and the cloud, they both together really allow for rapid innovation. I was able to set up the baseline for Salary Overflow in just a matter of weeks. I also learned that if you have a cool app idea, you really don't need a team of developers to help you bring that idea to life. You only need AWS Amplify. Like, that is your team right there. React versus Angular. Yeah, so before this project, I had only worked with Angular. And after this project, I now prefer React over Angular. I just found React was easier to use, and the way the components fit together, it really allowed me to quickly develop the user interface for the app. GraphQL versus REST. So before this project, I had never used GraphQL before. And what I found is that the flexibility that GraphQL provides cannot be beat. I remember one night I was building the app, working on a screen, and I was troubleshooting an issue. So I was seeing an error with how the date was coming back from the database and the conversion process to display it on the screen. And I troubleshooted for a couple of hours, and I realized for this particular screen, you don't even need to show the date. So I just removed it from the API, and the problem was solved in less than a second. So the flexibility provided by GraphQL cannot be beat. Next steps. So what's next for Salary Overflow? I will continue to build out new features. Like I said, I released the MVP back in October, and the app really took off. I had no idea that it would be so useful to people. So because of that, I'm going to continue to build out new features. I mentioned to you that I was going to incorporate machine learning to predict demand for a certain role in a given area, and to also have salary projections. I'm going to add a real search feature. In the demo, what you saw was just simple filtering of a table, but I'm working now on this awesome search screen that allows for better searching. I'm also going to add downloadable reports and dashboards. And then I'll also incorporate salary negotiation features. So what's next for you? Let's normalize talking about our salaries to further equality in tech, and you can help by going to salaryoverflow.com and entering your salary information. Thank you. And here's my contact information. Now let's open it up for Q&A.